Hello and welcome to Powerful Places Podcasts. I'm your host, Gary White, and today we hear a conversation that Elyn and I had about our recent trip to Amsterdam. This podcast is available either in audio form or with a video, so take your pick and let's get started. Well, here we are, home from our trip to Amsterdam.
Our whirlwind 3-day, was it? We left Friday, and today is Monday, so we were just there for basically the weekend to meet up with Gary's son, Greg. And since people have asked us, how do we do it, and what do we do when we travel, we thought we'd just give you a very brief introduction.
Okay, well, in the first place, we found ourselves in a very interesting district of Amsterdam. The hotel was in the red light district.
Yes, it was just at the edge, not deep in the midst of it, but it was at the edge. So we were surrounded by sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
And you didn't mention that we also had the oldest church in Amsterdam in the same area.
Yes, we walk up the street a few blocks past the head shops and the cafes, I guess they're called, but they offer you your choice of hemp products in various forms. And we turned left, and there was the oldest church in Amsterdam. It has been heavily rebuilt over the centuries, including stripped of its finery during, I think, in the 16th century when they had an iconoclastic movement. But the interesting thing, one of the interesting things about this church is that as you turn this corner, to your left are the glass-fronted rooms or cubicles of prostitutes in this area, showing off their wares to all lookers on, and right next to that is a outside sort of beer garden where families with kids and toddlers and strollers are sitting out drinking beer. And then right across from that is the old church. It's a true indication of the tolerance of the Dutch.
Yes, they are a tolerant people. It's amazing.
Seem to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we didn't spend all the time at the hotel. We'd actually...
Or in the red light district.
Or the red light district. We actually branched out into town and took advantage of our Amsterdam pass to go to quite a number of the museums.
Yes, Gary had done some research online and decided to buy it. It offered a discount if we purchased 3 days online. And sometimes these aren't worth it because you don't have enough time to really take advantage. But since we were going to be there for the equivalent of 3 days and it was all of the public transportation, we thought it might be a good deal. And in fact, it was. We rode the trams. We got into most of the museums with this card. It saved us from waiting in lines, and it was very efficient.
Yes. There are a few museums that it doesn't cover, namely the biggest museum, the Rijksmuseum, is not on that pass, but most of them were. We got either a discount or we got in free.
Mm-hmm. The Rijksmuseum itself has been closed since 2003. It will reopen in 2013, but they have opened up a wing of the museum and put their a select few of their pride and joys and their favorite, their biggest tourist draws, like the Night Watchers, the Rembrandt, and various Vermeers and Delft's tiles and all kinds of things, so that people can really have a fairly decent introduction to the contents of the museum.
Actually, the brief introduction was much better than the experience I had in 1972 when I first went to the Rijksmuseum, because they had, I think, everything they owned hung on the walls, floor to ceiling, and you couldn't take any of it in. It was just overwhelming. in its mass. So this small taste really was it was enough to get a real feel. We got a real feel for Rembrandt and Vermeer and the school of Rembrandt and his use of light and the way he approached light coming from angles that you wouldn't think about. As photographers, we think we maybe learned a few things from Rembrandt on this trip.
We also went to the Amsterdam branch of the Hermitage Museum. The Van Gogh Museum is closed temporarily, but they have ported over 75 representative paintings, drawings, etc. Of Van Gogh, and they have a wonderful exhibit at the Hermitage. I know you're going to say something. I just want to say it opened at 10 o'clock because we had our Amsterdam pass. That got us in free. We had, not free, but it got us in very quickly without having to wait in line. And then we had to pay a surcharge of €2.50. But it was really worth getting there by 10 o'clock when they opened, before the line really got long, and it was worth having purchased a ticket in advance.
Yes. And again, 75 works of Van Gogh is plenty for one sitting. And it's nicely presented to show the early life and through to his later period, and it's an excellent exhibit.
I learned so much about his intentional taking on of becoming a painter as his dedication, as his career, and how he studied drawing and how he studied color and how he conscientiously made paintings that were experiments and practices as he tried to develop his own unique style. It wasn't something that just happened by chance or
Right.
because he was never taught. It was not like that at all.
No, he actually had a fair amount of instruction at different times. And it was interesting to me that he called his paintings studies until the very later paintings. He still was considering them to be studies, to be practice or something like that.
And the other thing that was quite interesting was the influence of Japanese art on his work. The flat wood prints, the colored wood prints, the use of color, the use of perspective and outlining of forms. There are actually some paintings there that were his sort of copies, of specific Japanese prints that he and his brother Teo had collected.
Yes, and there were quotes from his letters where he said that his work was greatly influenced by Japan. So you began to see what the elements of his style really were. And true to form, the last time I saw Van Gogh, I walked out of the museum and suddenly my eyes were different. I saw the world in a different way. I began to see the outlines on things where I hadn't seen them before, and that happened again. It's really interesting when you get into the sensibility of a single artist that way, that you begin to take on his way of looking at the world.
Or hers.
Or hers, exactly. So that was an excellent time in the Hermitage, and they have signs all over Amsterdam saying that Vincent has moved to the Hermitage.
Yeah, and they show a sort of a rolling cart that you would load boxes on to indicate that they've moved him. But we also, on a much lighter note, we went to the Museum of Bags and Purses, which has a collection of 3,000 such items and is the largest such collection in the world, and it was quite interesting. It placing bags and purses and pockets, which were the original bags and purses, into a historical context.
I didn't think that I was going to get a lot out of that, but actually, for the first half of the time we were there, I found it quite interesting, particularly the very early works, where it would be what we would call in the U.S. like a fanny pack with all kinds of bags. It was literally their pockets. They didn't have any pockets in their clothes, so they would have this hanging bag with 10 or 20 little bags in it. So I found that interesting, and also the ladies' bag for each period of the day: the morning bag, the afternoon bag, the bag you take to the opera.
That opened up to have a fan, a concealed opera glasses,
yes.
a little space with a pencil and paper, some money to give to the toilet attendant.
Yes.
And what else was there? A little space for powder.
Yes.
It was amazing. It was like
take the shine off your nose.
But it struck me like one of these endless. How are they called? These the purse that has no bottom in it, because you open it. It looked very small and delicate, and you opened it, and it had all of these hidden compartments.
Right.
But that's not all we did. We went on a canal boat tour, which was fascinating.
Yes, it was billed as 100 places in Amsterdam, and I'm sure they've counted them all up and announced them all. But it was fascinating. Amsterdam was built in stages. This semicircular canal pattern, they kept overrunning the center part of it, and they would build another canal semicircle out from that one until they finally had, 4 or 5 levels of semicircular canals, and then connecting canals in between. It was an interesting trip.
But we also ate, and one thing we did, we tried the Indonesian rice table at several restaurants, and that was interesting. But we also did a cheese tasting. Gary's son Greg had checked on TripAdvisor and found a highly recommended cheese tasting at the Reppenauer Tasting House in Amsterdam. The warehouse is actually, I'm not sure if it's in Utrecht. It's in Utrecht. But they have a tasting house, and they sell their products in a small building near the Singel Canal. And it was absolutely fascinating to learn how to taste cheese.
This young woman was absolutely ecstatic about cheese and the way cheese went with wines.
Oh yes, we got wine and port to go with it.
Port to go with the cheese, and we learned that you had to cut the cheese very thin and hold it to the light to get the effect of the color and the texture.
Yes, we had a chart to fill out for each of 6 cheeses that ranged from color to smell. First, she said, smell it before you taste it. Smell it. Let the fragrance expand and relate to that, and then taste it. And then consistency,
right.
Texture.
And she talked about not just biting it and chewing it, but letting it lie on the tongue and see how it melted on the tongue. She was really into cheese. It was amazing.
There was a similarity with the purses in that she would say, "Well, this is a regular day cheese,
right?
Like I could compare it to your average handbag, and this would be an afternoon cheese,
right?
And then this one would be an evening cheese served with port. And one suggestion for a very aged, these are all cow's milk cheese, but for a very aged cow's milk cheese, I think it was 3 years old, was to try it with chocolate. And now that we've been home, the first thing we did was get out some
Try our
chocolate and
cheese
try
with
our cheese with
chocolate.
chocolate. And it was phenomenal.
Yes, it really did bring out flavors in the cheese that you didn't get otherwise. And it contributed to the chocolate. She was right. The combination was amazing. We went to 2 rice tables. Indonesian food is very big in Amsterdam because Amsterdam, Holland, was the home of the Dutch East Indies Empire. So there's a lot of Indonesian food, and we went to 2 of these where they lay out a table of
10 or 12 different
yes,
small plates filled with meat and brochettes and curry and pickled this and that and vegetables and fried bananas, and
some of them were hot, were very spicy, and others they liked the peanut taste, so there was peanut sauce.
some had a soy sauce.
Yes, soy sauce, all kinds of things. Satay, of course, the skewers with meat on a stick.
And I was very pleased. I have celiac, and so I cannot have any gluten products. And at the first place we went to, which was Sama Sebo, very, very crowded. Excellent food, very crowded. When I said this to the waiter, he said, no problem. And they brought out special, like a papadon bread, sort of a cracker, crispy thing for me. And they said their soy sauce had no gluten. And they were completely prepared and knew what to do. The second place we went to was a little less certain about it all. And
they handled it in an interesting way in the second place. He laid the whole table out, and he angled the spoons either away from Elyn if she was not to eat that particular dish, or toward her if she could eat that dish. And he had it laid out from the blandest taste to the hottest taste. So everything was nicely laid out. The food in the first place was definitely better than the second, but it was
but the ambiance in the second was better, because in the first one we were sitting in the bar in a small table that should never have been there.
Right.
But they had everybody crammed in. But it was excellent, excellent food.
Right.
And what else in this very short 2-day tour of Amsterdam?
What else did we do?
Well, I think we've done enough. Talked to people, walked all over, took the tram,
Yes.
which is a very smoothly done system.
Yeah, Amsterdam, if you're into doing some walking, it is really a totally walkable city. We used the tram when we were rushing from one thing to another, and it does get you around faster. But you also see less of the city on the trams. If you're walking, you see other stores and people on the street. So it's a totally walkable city. But if you have a short period of time and you want to see everything, I think...
Or half of everything.
Or half of everything. The tram is definitely a way to go. And it's on the surface, so it's not like a subway where you are underground, although they do have a metro system as well. But then you don't see the city.
So I guess I'd never been to Amsterdam. Gary had been. I'd never been. I would say I now have a sense of Amsterdam, and it was a lovely city. I don't necessarily recommend a 2-day speed trip to anywhere, including Amsterdam. But if that's all the time you have, it's doable, and you can get a lot out of it.
Yes. Okay. Go to www.powerfulplaces.com and www.powerfulplaces.info to learn more about us, Elyn, Aviva, and Gary White, and our travels.